So Etienne, you didn't miss much. I just explained people how we met at that San Francisco Richmond High Time event,
Cannabis.
and I just started to speak a little bit about BPG, but before that about prohibition. I was telling people I never thought about the reason behind prohibition until I actually came to the States. And I was in contact with people like you where, because legalization was happening here, the history of prohibition was majorly important. All my life, I had spent a quarter of a century under the stigma of prohibition, but I had never asked myself the question. So you were in the middle.
Yes.
Before,
Well,
like to create, to really make, give that awareness that it's more than a plant with the stigma it had, it becomes something that was changing medicine, that was changing the life of 8 patients in San Francisco. I mean, it was a revolution, huh? Let's face it.
yes. Well, we were just a bunch of people who were frustrated and tired of our friends going to jail over a plant. It just seemed completely illogical. Um, I myself got involved. I'm a combat veteran. But before I was in combat, Jack Herrera came to my university back in 1989. So for me, it was about education, and I learned all this incredible information about this plant because there was so much limit of information on the plant. So when Debbie Goldsberry was also there, she actually extended her hand out and had a piece of hemp cloth. And she said, touch this, this is hemp. And I remember reaching out, and as soon as I touched it, she says, yes, that's cannabis. And my mind kind of went poof. I didn't understand the different qualities or all what went into cannabis and all what was cannabis because I grew up during full prohibition. I grew up with lies and misinformation. I even grew up talking to a friend of mine in high school because I was worried about his marijuana use. And I never really got turned on until I was 16, and it was crappy Mexican, I'll be honest. My friend Chris, we went out to the cane fields because I'm from Southern Louisiana. That's how I got my funny name. And I didn't really get high. I tried it. It didn't really do much for me, but I just don't think it was that good to begin with. But when I graduated, left Louisiana, and I went to college in West Virginia, I got a whole kind of a baptism. I actually tried real kind bud for the first time. And I had joined, I joined the National Guard because I was poor. I wanted to go to college, but I couldn't afford to go to college. So I did the GI Bill. And like I said, in '89, when Jack came, I ended up taking that first copy of The Emperor Wears No Clothes, and I did a research paper on it for my English 101 class, because why not? There, I could only find two periodicals, High Times and The Emperor Wears No Clothes. Now, Emperor Wears No Clothes is a bunch of periodicals put together into a book. It's hard to reference. But my professor's like, look, kid, you only got two references. I'll give you a grade, but, you know, that's just how it goes. But I realized quite early on that the GI Bill that was paying for my college just pays for college. I was going to art school, so art stuff costs a lot of money. So I learned quickly that by selling pot, I could, you know, afford my own pot as well as afford to buy the art supplies that I needed. Then I got activated in Next thing I know, I found myself on the front lines in the Iraq War. Now, I will let you know, while I was in Saudi Arabia, I did score hashish, and that was very, I scored red Lebanese. Now, just quickly, there was a money exchange program going on in Saudi Arabia. So when we were there, we had Saudi Arabians doing KP duty. So they liked American $100 bills. So we would exchange $100 bills for Saudi dinar and other, various cool looking money compared to ours. And the first guy I asked, I was like, "Can you get me hashish?" And he immediately put his hands over his ears. And I tried so hard on day one. I had 2 days of KP duty, and he wouldn't do it on day one. So that night I went back to the dorm. I got as many $100 bills from everybody I could. And I gave him the money. I'm like, "I got a lot of hundreds here." And he's like, "Oh." I was like, "But I got to have hashish." And he's like, "Oh, no, in trouble." I was like, "I'm sorry, if you want this, that's how we do it." He cursed under his breath and said, "Give me $20. And so I gave him $20 US, and he came back with a couple of slats, little thin slats, about yay big. And I put those, I shaped them into my boot, and I put those in my boot. And so that's how I was able to score hash in Saudi Arabia and get through some of the Gulf War. But basically, I got, let's see, that was in 1990. And also in 91 when we were going through the Gulf War. Unfortunately, they were destroying the Baqa Valley. But got through the war. Then the day the war ended, I sustained injuries, and I was medevaced and destroyed my knee. And I found myself in Germany and on morphine. And I was talking to a doctor, and I said I didn't like this morphine. And he said, "Have you tried hashish?" And we laughed. And then he stopped laughing, and he's like, "No, seriously." And I thought he was crazy. As he said, "You can't get it here," because that's the first thing I asked him. I was like, "Where the hell do I get hash?" He's like, "Try off base." So, yeah, you go off base and you go asking around, immediately found myself in the black market and trying to find medicine. And I scored this black tar looking stuff, which was hash. And started smoking it and found it actually helped with my, we could think again. Morphine's great if you want to sit there and drool all over yourself. But I was an artist. I was creative. I put myself through art school. So I couldn't be creative. Being lucid in my mind was impossible on morphine. Then I got back to the United States after rehab, and I tried to go back to school. And then in the fall of 92, I had a positive urinalysis for THC the day of my promotion. So, out of the army, I lost all my benefits, and I found myself making criminals out of my friends to get my medicine, because this worked for me. And I had wasted down to 90-something pounds. I was diagnosed with what was called Gulf War syndrome. I had been exposed to nuclear, biological, and radiation because all the rounds that the Iraqis had were Saudi Arabia, and they were all covered in radioactive material, and it was everywhere. I was attached to the French Foreign Legion as their support, so I got to the Foreign quite well, and I got asked to join, but I refused because that's a 10-year service. But I got a life experience out of it, needless to say. But when I moved to California, after I got kicked out of college, I moved to California in 92, and it just happened that serendipitously, the Cannabis Action Network had just moved to the Bay Area. Now, I moved to California. I was working as an ice cream parlor manager, And unfortunately, my roommate at the time had a heroin habit. And I came home and found all my stuff gone. And I had just bought a High Times magazine, and I was sitting there in the last lamp in the house he left it on, and I'm flipping through this High Times magazine. Now, the guy had literally just cut this off the top of the stack. And as I'm flipping through this High Times, I realize all these articles are 3 to 4 months behind. I'm like, wait a second. And I look back at the front cover, and it's next month's issue. And so I immediately realized, well, wait a second. If this is all being written about now, then I can actually get involved. And the next week, I happened to be walking down the street, and the guy was on the corner of Telegraph, Channing, and Berkeley. And he said, Cannabis Action Network, first meeting in a half hour. And a couple of my friends and I, we snatched that. We went to the event, and it was Debbie Goldsberry was there, John Hunt, and a gentleman by the name of Dr. Todd Mikaria. Well, when Dr. Todd spoke, basically my ears opened forever. He was a researcher and doctor, and he had a book called the Medical Marijuana Papers, which was a big, thick book, green book, which was a compilation of all the information compiled from the government by the government. And I was blown away. And Dr. Todd was like, hey, you know, afterwards, you're fascinating. Let's talk about your Gulf War syndrome. I'd like to actually document that. I don't have any patients like that. I was like, well, I'm a medical marijuana patient. I would love to have a doctor and actually deal with this properly, because this is well before 215. You know, 215 wouldn't pass until 96. So I got involved. And when, after that first event, Debbie asked her if people would show up and volunteer, and the next day I showed up. I was the only one to show up, and we had I had a sheet of paper basically with phone numbers, and she said, call these people. We want a flyer for this event. It's going to be the 50th anniversary of LSD. I was like, okay. We did. We flyered, we put out information, and next thing I know, when April 13th came around, there I was in San Francisco working the front door at the 50th anniversary of LSD. And I would basically meet everyone in drug policy or underground drug policy. I would meet Ed Rosenthal for the first time, various psychedelic pioneers. But I just felt, wow, this is a really amazing movement here with so many unique people. So basically, shortly after, I kept showing up every day to help out. And they're like, hey, kid, why don't you quit your job? You can move in with us, and you can be a volunteer. And I was like, oh, hell yeah. Volunteer with Cannabis Action Network? That sounds awesome. And they basically put me out on the street. On the corner of Telegraph and Channing, we had 2 6-foot tables. Back in '93, which had, you know, it had High Times magazine, it had grow books, it had these Did You Know hemp shirts with hemp facts on the back and cool designs on the front. But that way, if you were standing in line, somebody could read the hemp facts on your back. We also sold hemp twine and hemp patches. And we also had a museum with us as different products that were made from hemp, so that I could put that in somebody's hand and give them the epiphany. So after months on the avenue, I was really good at barking. You know, we had like 9 seconds to get people from across the street that were coming over to our corner. Our corner was allowed because it was a free speech zone. So Berkeley had designated the corner of Telegraph and Channing a free speech area. So we just showed up and volunteered and spoke every single day. So I set up the tables and I spoke and I talked to people. And when the lights would turn red and they'd be standing on the other side of the street, I'd be, free marijuana. Light would change. Information right over here. Come on over. And they would come over and they would come around my booth. I grow books because people were afraid you might end up on a list for actually doing grow books and stuff like that. So, And we sold hemp twine. And over time, Debbie and them were like, "You're really good. We're going to put you on the road." Debbie and the Cannabis Action Network had basically done state tours where they go around to free speech areas. And I got to go on my first one in the fall of '93, which was 13 states. And I got to travel with a woman by the name of Elvie Muzica. Elvie Muzica is one of the medical marijuana patients from the federal government who receives a tin of 300 joints from the United States government from the University of Mississippi. It's the crappiest weed you've ever seen. But
I've heard, yeah.
terrible. It's a of Mexican origin, and it's grown at about 3 to 4% THC, and then it's stored in a 55-gallon drum for like, let's see, Elvie had stuff that was 9 years old at times. So traveling around with a woman who had lost one of her eyes and was a mother of 2, and she would whip out her tin of 300 joints delivered to her by the DEA. Man, let me tell you, it was an amazing thing to go around the country and actually educate people. So over time, I would spend the next 2 years, I would do rallies and teach-ins in 47 U.S. states. North Dakota, Alaska, and Hawaii, I never did rallies in, but I've traveled to them now. But back then, it was hard to travel to those states. But I got to meet a lot of the medical marijuana people from the United States government, various people around the country while traveling with Elvie, because they're a small pack of people who know each other. And we would just go around and get yelled at, spit on, told to get out of town. You guys are crazy. This isn't going to happen. Not in my town, not in our lifetime. Basically, everybody told us stop.
Yeah.
Yeah, but fortunately, you know, we had benefactors like Steve D'Angelo. Steve D'Angelo put his money where his mouth is and supported our organization, helped buy us vans and keep us up and going and out on the road. So after 2 years on the road, I found myself actually at Steve D'Angelo's house for one of the fall DPA meetings, and I was burnt out. After 2 years on the road, I was just a crispy critter, and I wanted to settle down. And Steve watched me. There's a picture I have of basically it's Jack Herrera and Dennis Peron sitting arguing over who was going to run their initiative next. And I had run Jack's initiatives, unfortunately, a few times, and they just failed. He asked for too much. They were 4 pages long. And Dennis said, "No, I'm really going to run my medical initiative. We're going to keep it very simple." And I was able to sit and talk between the two because they were both veterans, but I was also a combat veteran. So upon talking with both of them, we kind of all come to an understanding, and Dennis decided he's going to run his initiative. And I was in the kitchen afterwards, and Steve's like, "Kid, you got some talent. What are you doing with yourself?" I was like, "I just spent 2 years on the road. I'm burnt. I need to do something with my life." And he's like, "Well, I'm starting a company. It's an American hemp company, but we're calling it Ecolution Hemp Company. And we're going to import hemp from Eastern Europe, and we're making jeans. And we're going to be doing this, but it's out of the East Coast." And I was like, "Okay." And next thing I know, I found myself, you know, doing hemp. I did that for a few years. I met my wife. We got married actually at the High Times Cannabis Cup back in 1995. And, which was pretty crazy. Stephen Gaskin did the ceremony. It was an amazing time. Jack Herrera was there. My cake had 1.5 pounds of trichomes in it. It was a crazy, crazy experience. So Ecolution basically imported and exported hemp twine and hemp jeans. And after about 3 years of doing that, my marriage kind of came to an end. And my ex-wife and I decided to leave the East Coast and move back to California. But I had just visited my dear friend Todd McCormick on vacation. And my friend Todd McCormick had a mansion at that time in Beverly Hills. and Bel Air. And I actually went there, got to meet all kinds of celebrities, and realized I need to be back in California. The East Coast sucked. And moved back to California. And shortly after my wife and I officially divorced, we went our own ways. But while I was doing hemp, my friends did this initiative, and it became Proposition 215, which of course then went on to successfully win in California. And my friends had started to run dispensaries. So by the time I got burnt out of Ecolution in '99 and moved back to the Bay Area, my dear friend Debbie Goldsberry was like, "Hey, I got a spare bedroom," or as we called it, the divorce room. And I moved back. And as soon as I came back, I basically found myself with old friends again. And my old friends were all very successful in cannabis. So my friend Richard Lee was like, "Look, kid, I've got this abandoned restaurant in Oakland. It's an old Indian restaurant. It's been abandoned for a year and a half, but I need you to clear it out for me." And I did, because Richard Lee is in a wheelchair. So he ended up starting the Bulldog out of that place. So I was the person who helped set up the I set the grow downstairs, because again, he couldn't go downstairs. There was no elevator. So I basically became the hired person behind the scenes, because I was trusted as an activist after my many years of being an activist. So a whole new bunch of people had showed up on the scene post 215 happening. So people were looking for people they could trust. So I ended up working for him. Then I ended up working for Jeff Jones at his dispensary until the government shut it down. I ended up at, shortly after, my friend Ed Rosenthal was like, "Hey, come grow for me." So I ended up working with Ed Rosenthal for a while and growing and providing clones. So next thing I know, I was driving around in the late 90s and early 2000s. I was driving around delivering clones to Dennis Peron's dispensary and providing medicine to everybody I could via the way that we were. So when I was in charge of Ed's Grows, we grew in different facilities and we grew different experimental ways. Ed belonged to all different types of associations, plant associations. So we got white papers all the time. So I learned to grow all different types of ways. Well, one of the things before I moved to Northern California, I had picked up one of the first isolators when I worked at the Galaxy Gallery in '99. In '98 or so, a gentleman came through with one of the first isolators. It was basically just a cylindrical can with the PVC on the outside, and it coned down and drained down into a tube that went into a little bottle. And it was just a single micron screen. And so I started to play with water hash back then myself. So while I was back in Northern California, I had played with my water hash. And then, of course, various other types of hash started to come out. Back in '99, that's when the first BHO showed up on the scene. But it was on, basically it was run over bud. So it was called honey bud. So that was the first stuff that we saw of a different type of concentrate. I myself, I found that I gravitated toward concentrates myself, because that worked for me medicine-wise. But I liked full cannabinoid spectrum. So I would take various types of hash and I would combine them all together. I would literally take them put them in a coffee grinder, grind them all together, and then press it together. That for me was the way for me to get the full spectrum need for my pain. I have nerve damage. I've got various chronic pain that I deal with that I'm just, it's just part of life. So it worked for me. So when I was back working with my friends in Northern California and making my own hash, I was feeling great. And then um, I had an opportunity to come work with my friend Debbie, who's like, "Hey, Etienne, why don't you come work for BPG now?" And so in about 2001, that's when I started to work at Berkeley Patients Group. One of the original founders, Jim McClellan, passed away due to AIDS. He was an HIV patient, and he created this amazing dispensary. He had worked with Jeff Jones and his dispensary previously, and after they got shut down, he created one of his own. So he brought in Debbie Goldsberry and Don Duncan, and we basically just continued our activism from the dispensary. So we created shortly after I was involved with Berkeley Patients Group, our friend Ed Rosenthal got busted. And on the way up in an elevator, friends of us were like, we're tired of seeing our friends go to jail. Let's create an organization. So we have to, medically specific. So Americans for Safe Access was created. We found ways to take the dispensary and make it as profitable as possible so that we could take those profits and funnel into National Organization for Reform of Marijuana Laws, MPP, SSDP, all these different organizations. So we found that back then, the original law basically said we couldn't be for-profit entities. So we acted as not-for-profits. So we took those not-for-profit, profits, and we used it to, change policy. So inadvertently, our ASA started this law called, with Dana Rohrabacher, called the Rohrabacher Amendment, which basically started the whole concept of the idea that the federal government can no longer spend money on states where they have legal cannabis businesses. That failed 8 times before it actually passed once.
It took a minute.
It took a long time, okay? It takes a long time, okay? This is the reality of changing policy. So we as activists put our money where our mouth is, and with our organization, things happen. We've started various organizations. Ed Rosenthal was sentenced to 1 day, but then he went out and started screaming at the prosecutor in the media, and the prosecutor got mad and basically went out and charged him again. And this time I was working at BPG, and I got served by the DEA to show up for a grand jury. And then I was also to go before federal court. So basically, I showed up for a federal grand jury, declared my 5th and 10th Amendment rights, said, no, I'm not going to convict my friend, because they were trying to actually put kingpin charges on Ed. And if any one of us said that Ed was the boss, he would have been given kingpin charges and would have been put for life in jail. And I was not going to do that. And I was the first of the recalcitrant 7 to, after the grand jury, they decided to charge Ed again, and they put him through trial. And they basically put 7 witnesses, one of them, myself, on trial in federal court for refusing to testify for Ed. So I got called on, had to sit before a federal judge in a huge, very expensive courtroom and declare my 5th and 10th Amendment rights. 5th being I will not incriminate myself. The 10th being that it's states' rights. So fuck off, federal government. And I declared myself a sovereign citizen, told them I'd been a guinea pig due to their Gulf War, and you can throw me in jail. And the court was respectful and actually thanked us for all 7 of us who said, no, we refuse to testify against our friend, and as opposed to sentence us to jail, sent us home, because the judge realized that he would have put us in jail for longer than what Ed would have gone to. So definitely had to flex my rights there as an individual citizen, and realized that, you know, we were always kind of in the DEA, the federal government's kind of eyes, because we were there doing it every single day. And we got up yet tomorrow and we did it again. And we found out and that's the government wasn't going to stop. And we kept existing. And in 2012, the federal government came and evicted Berkeley Patients Group from its location, saying that we were 984 feet from a French school. That was from corner to corner property as the crow flies. But if you walked it, it's over 1,000 feet. Regardless, the government said, if you do not kick them out, we're going to take your bank. Yeah, the government went that hard. Yeah, so we moved. We opened up the next day as a delivery service, stayed open, and found a new location, which happened to be much smaller. Rebuilt that in 5 months and reopened December 12th, 2012.
From the ground up, when you say rebuilding, guys, it was like an old gas station or something that was not used. It would have never been sold to nobody. And
it was basically abandoned 25 years. It was the first A&W root beer stand, I guess, in the Bay Area, and they used to actually behind the stand, they used to work on the trucks, and apparently they had so much toxic leakage from the trucks that they declared a Superfund site. So it had been abandoned for 25 years. It was cleaned up, but nobody would rent into it or go into it because it was considered a bad spot. So when we found it was fine, but we had to plane it. We had to tear off the old awning, and it was basically just a shell of a building. And within 5 months, we pulled off a full-on miracle and reopened the dispensary. But it was a challenge. But the city saw what the federal government was doing was wrong. And the federal government came after us again and then tried to evict us from our current location, saying that we were within 1,000 feet of a daycare center and preschool. Well, daycares and preschool are not part of the law. So we took the federal government to court and we sued them. And in 2016, that little law I told you about called the Rohrabacher Amendment by that organization that we created called Americans for Safe Access was now law of the land. Not only was it law of the land, it was on a rider that goes with practically every budget. And in 2016, the government finally realized, oh, I can't fight them anymore. We throw in the towel. Trust me, all our lawyers told us we were going to lose this fight. When we fought anyway, and we ended up winning. And we were finally allowed to exist. And 2 years ago, yeah, you know, we changed with Prop 64, you know, with legalization. We changed from full medical access to then adult use access, of which we saw about 80% of the pre-215 market evaporated into thin air. Gone completely. It's sad. It's really frustrating.
It is. Also, it's like, I want to mention that this happened to you with Berkeley City behind you. They always liked you. I don't know how you managed it from the beginning, but they always liked you. They always protected you. So the Fed were at you despite the city wanted to keep you. And Berkeley Patient Group was a place where you could smoke, meet people, get help. I mean, it's like a lot of people in Berkeley, they were at one place where they could smoke in peace and safely. It was it was Berkeley Patient Group. And no, it's nice, but it's not the same. It's a sales place. It's not a place that was dedicated truly to your neighborhood like it was.
Right. And we because it was too small. We could no longer have the lounge that we had. The lounge that we had for 11 years was a great bonding place for patients to talk with each other. It was a great place for community. Look, I'll be honest, people even were dealing and that sort of stuff back in the day you know, that's just how it was. But it was a safe place where people could medicate. And we found that a lot of our federal people in federal housing would come and medicate because it was a few places where it was safe. It was an oasis where they could actually imbibe and use their medicine without fear of being persecuted. We had volcanoes set up around the perimeter. We had one-way glass where you could look out, but you couldn't look in, so people could sit and medicate and see everything going on in the street. So we missed that when the government shut us down. And needless to say, in 2012, it was impossible to find a landlord, much less to find a large enough space. But finally, at the end of last year, we finally found a new location on the corner of Telegraph and University and San Pablo. And we then had to engage our city because we wanted to have our smoking lounge back. So we had to activate our people, go out and educate our city council and our mayor, and we ended up getting that as well. So we just now won the right to have smoking in our new location, but of course now we can't move into our new location because the people who are dealing with the planning and all that are kind of furloughed due to this quarantine. So, and as well as our construction can't start until, of course, we, you know, allow for construction again. So things are on hold, but we hope to, in our new location, transcend what we did in the past and in the present and present a new form of BPG, one that has the best efforts, such as we will have on-site smoking again for people, for vaporization, hope to have a dab bar, as well as community meetings again. You know, access and being around like-minded people is very uplifting to yourself as well as your community. And we did various things like yoga, acupuncture, literacy training. Again, we found ways to impact our community in the positive. We were philanthropic and give to our local libraries. We give to various organizations because we have found that when you give, people respond. On top of that, philanthropy is awesome. You know, we started for our 20th anniversary. We just turned 20 years for BPG. And we we created a campaign for good. So we basically found 10 nonprofit organizations that we're going to promote over the next 10 years. So that are directly involved in our community and are helping people in our community. And we wanted to make it so that other people could replicate this, so they could take this idea and help those people in their community and raise the standards in their community. You know, everywhere we have moved, we've cleaned up our neighborhood. We've cleaned up the areas where we are in. And we have destroyed the stigma that, you know, you're just a bunch of dirty hippies. Well, it turns out, you know, we're very responsible. You know, we ran literally prostitutes out of the neighborhood. We literally cleaned up the streets that were dirty and still do, and have had a positive influence everywhere that we've moved. So we've done our best to take all those stereotypes and turn them on their heads, from everything from going back to Berkeley Patients Group, why it has the name Berkeley Patients Group. You have to understand that back then, federally, it was, there was no medical defense. So Jim, Debbie, and Don had the foresight to think and use the name Berkeley Patients Group. We were all expected to be arrested and to be in jail. Okay, so I expected to have, you know, bracelets on, and we all expected to challenge this from jail cells. So we never expected to see 5 years, 10 years, or 20 years. And against all of our lawyers' wishes, you know, we kept the books, we kept them diligent because we wanted to prove in a court of law that everything that we were doing was legitimate and above board. And if we were arrested and thrown in jail, we couldn't use a medical marijuana defense. But if the jury heard Berkeley Patients Group every time they read us and read our charges, they would hopefully get the understanding that we were patients and hopefully decide to throw out the law. So these are ways that we put our freedom on the line. You know, I got tired of making criminals out of my friends, but realized early on that I could, as a straight cis male, I had an influence and could use my voice to help various other underprivileged people. My father and brother were both born blind. My father was the first blind lawyer in Louisiana. He ended up disbarring himself, being a sociopath from taking money and not doing the job. My brother was born without eyeballs. So he's kind of looked like as a freak. So I spent my childhood fighting for the rights of the blind. My mom created an organization called American Council for Blind Parents because back then, in the late 60s, there was no way to, congratulations, you just had a child who was born blind. What do you do? So she created that to help. So when my brother, we lived 3.5 hours away from Baton Rouge, my mom would have to physically drive us to go drop him off on Sundays, and then on Fridays, drive 3.5 hours, pick him up, drive 3.5 hours back. The state of Louisiana had a law that basically they were supposed to pay for transportation for the handicapped, and they weren't doing it. They weren't funding it. So my mom sued the state of Louisiana and fought. And after years of fighting, and I remember getting nasty phone calls of people making threats and all kinds of nasty shit, she eventually won. She beat the state, and the state had to actually fund transportation for the handicapped. And
So you had a blue map.
I, air of
You
activism
know what I
because
mean? It's like from childhood, you had the blue map that if you really, really are on your right, you can win.
yes,
That's
but you
super.
better know your.
Wow.
So she taught me to help out those that are lesser than you. And happy Mother's Day, Mother. I love you for that and what you've taught me. And I have continued that, and I continue to send the elevator back down. I continue to help people and continue to push for, you know, right now we're pushing for equity. We need to, all those are brothers and sisters who have been hurt by this drug war need to have access and should have a little more of a leg up because they got basically taken completely out. So I have to, being the straight cis male, have to use my voice again to help out a whole different line and a whole other generation. I stand on the shoulders of giants, those that, the Jack Herreras, the Dennis Perons, I've worked with them, the Steve D'Angelos, the Debbie Goldsberries. And so now it's our job to be the leaders, to send the elevator back down, to educate, to I mentor. I'm a combat veteran. I lost all my rights when I went to the VA and I told them I was using medical marijuana. They physically removed me from 4 different VA facilities. They were like, "Get the fuck out," because I was a known drug user because I told them I used medical marijuana. And at the time, I even was trying Marinol from a friend of mine who was a VA patient, and I would trade him my Valium meds for his Marinol. And I tried to get a Marinol prescription even through the VA, and the VA just said, "Kid, get out." I said, "No," and they would send in security, and they would physical lift me and throw me out. Well, one day I was in DC because I lived in DC. I remember walking by the cancer ward and I smelled fucking marijuana. And I was like, what? And I asked the nurse, I was like, "Why am I smelling marijuana?" And she pulls me aside. She's like, "Look, this is a cancer ward. We turn our eye if somebody needs to use it. I was like, but I say I use it and I'm blackballed. She's like, yep, bye. So I realized early on that I had to fight for my rights. So along the way, I found various senators and Congress people, and I'm working with various people from Dita Titus to Earl Blumenauer and others. We're working to change the cannabis laws for our veterans, and we have been making great progress. But as soon as we get things out of committee, unfortunately, they get kicked out. So I've been mentoring various medical marijuana veterans groups, so that hopefully one day I'll get the rights for everybody and in turn get my own.
It's getting close, and it's like there is at least a strong awareness of how much it helps. You know what I mean? And it's like, it's what you need. Like,
but they thought we were crazy and thought we were, on marijuana, the first time we were telling them that. It's taken generations to get them to come around, and it's probably going to take another generation before we have them flipped. But, we're not going to stop. We're going to continue to use our influence, and we're gaining momentum. But of course, we have to have our failures. Like I said, the Rohrabacher Amendment failed 8 times, before, it actually, became law. So we have to take our bumps. Change doesn't happen quickly. And don't get in this if you're hitting it for the short term. I just turned 50. I've been doing this for 30 years. I've been doing this more than anything in my life. And I'm amazed that it's gone from, it's never going to happen in my lifetime to when's it coming to my state, But at the same time, it's frustrating because even in California, we have a shitty law. We have to, 215 wasn't perfect. 64 wasn't perfect either. It's a line in the sand. So we need to actually create another initiative and change the law, lower this taxation, stop the overcriminalization of 18 to 21-year-olds, and, change. It doesn't work.
how can it be legal when on our packaging it's written down that we
It's
are
not legal.
Schedule 1 drug? You know
It's
what
not,
I mean?
I don't get any protection. I can't even use a bank. All my taxes are as protection money, basically, because I've been kicked out of, guess how many banks I've been kicked out of?
8?
Add 30 onto that. 38.
38? Jesus
Yeah,
Christ.
I've been kicked out of 38 banks because
I didn't even know you could choose between 38 bags.
it's not easy, dog. Trust me. But fortunately, we're in the Bay Area and there's lots of banks. But yeah, 38 banks. I would love to just be able to act like a regular business, owner. I celebrate every payday, dog. You don't understand. It is frustrating.
No,
So
like I really wanted you to explain that to people because I got so much from Europe, people saying, "Oh, you're so lucky." No, it's not luck. I mean, people made it happen. It was a revolution. For this to happen, people went to jail. People gave
yes,
everything,
yes.
and you
And that,
don't get it if you don't.
that's the frustration I hear is that, well, 215 was better. I was like, no, it wasn't better. Yes, it allowed for a medical defense, but I know too many people. Dale Schaefer, my friend Todd McCormick, he went to jail 5 different times post Prop 215. Okay, the law wasn't perfect, but 64 isn't perfect either. And it's has good points, but it needs to be changed. So, this is my volley is we need to change the law. And, I love the guys from the CCHI, but the CCHI is the same law that we passed with Jack. It's the same failed law. So unfortunately, we have to come with better law. And so I would love for us to find the language, the original ALMA language before it was adulterated, and that was contributed to by a bunch of the activists around the state, and then build on that and build a law and build momentum again. But this is grassroots organizing. This is people going around and educating. This is also, it's very expensive to do initiatives. You know, unfortunately, it's very, very, very expensive. So
Eh,
just to get out there and get people gathering signatures, you know, getting it to the ballot, all that, it took years of failure. Remember, we failed with Prop 19, but out of
oh, I
that,
do remember that one.
yeah,
No,
Colorado
the
did.
problem, we are not together. There is always more than one
Yeah,
resolution that is trying to pass. We've never really been really good at togetherness, really, because
and that's
it's
always
hard.
that's always been the problem, you know, from you know, people like herbs, some people just like hash, some people just like water hash, some people like BHO. You know, that's the thing, is there's this plant crosses every socio-economic boundary. So to find one thing that unifies it besides cannabis is challenging to find all the, you know, put it all together. I mean, when we were doing the initiatives, the hemp people were like, we don't want anything to do with marijuana. So that was frustrating when we're sister plants, but then the hemp people are like, no, 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 the smoking is separate. We're the plant people. But now that's failed, and now they're coming back again, and now they want unity. So I'm like, yes, let's embrace hemp again. Let's stop the separation of cannabis, you know, in the different realms. It's all under cannabis. And because there's just so much misinformation, so much miseducation, it's rather frustrating to
This,
um,
I wanted to talk a lot more about education.
You're going to have it another time. You're
and
not.
that's frustrating.
We have 1 minute left.
Yeah, they pass laws here in America and then they educate you about the law. Whereas we're going from the grassroots, we're trying to educate people and then change the law. So we're kind of swimming upstream. And it was the momentum of people frustrated over, you know, the failures of the drug war that caused many of us to get involved. You know, we're tired of seeing our brothers and sisters go to jail. We're still in it. I'm still in it because I'm still fighting until everybody is out of jail.
Yeah, it's not yet there.
Arrested today. Our brothers and sisters in sister states are being arrested today and being put in jail and being treated like second-class citizens. And we have to use our voices and put our dollars to work to make that change happen. Otherwise, we're going to continue to wallow where we are. So 215, line in the sand. We move the discussion. 64 is the line in the sand. We've moved the discussion.
Next one. Let's go global.
Yes. Let's make it really legal. Let's not make it this fake legality that it is. Let's actually make it free for all. Let's stop the criminalization. Let's also find a way to bring the traditional market under this umbrella. Let's find a way, because I can't bag on the traditional market or the illegal market because I came from the illegal market. I learned how to dominate in the illegal market. We learned how to set prices and change the structure of how we did everything, you know. We are still learning. We're always learning. We have a lot to learn. And now with
Yes, but we know better than most, and the newcomers think that they can transform it and make something new from what is created, and they don't have our background. There is the level of education, it's towards the green rusher investor as much as towards the consumption and everybody down, so that we have the same language and we have a unity. I think we are past our time, Etienne. It was so fucking cool to talk to you, man.
Well, thank you, because when we first talked, I told you that, oh, we would never be able to afford to have your hash in my store. And many years later, your hash is in my store. So thank you.
So fucking happy. You have no idea. Bless
Oh,
you.
and just FYI, you call this Cannabis Warrior? Well, this is Cannabis Warrior in
Cannabis
Japanese.
Warrior, all right. Oh, wow, that's a beautiful one. Look here.
Daimasen. So this is a brotherhood tattoo with a few of my brothers who have earned their stripes in legalization. So when you called it Cannabis Warrior, I had to laugh because I'm not sure if you realize that that is.
No, but it comes from you guys, because for me it's like you fight a war and you bloody win it. You know what I mean? On both sides, in a mountain, and use the legal part here. It's like
Well, they taught us warriors to fight. they never taught us to stop.
Much love, man.
Much love. Thank you. It's an honor.
My pleasure.